Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 21 in the 68 Mustang fastback build known as Fangled. Now, there's 20 other videos on this car that I'm building, and it is a ground up build basically using dynacorn parts. So behind me you see the car, you see sitting in the front of it right there is a mock-up engine from Speedway Motors, and I'll list the link to that in the video. So what I've done is I've placed the mock-up engine with a mock-up transmission representing the 6R80. That kit is from Summit Racing. It's available at other vendors, but Summit is where I got it. What I was trying to do was understand the interaction between the transmission and the engine with the firewall and the floor pan, transmission tunnel, that sort of thing. And I did not want to use the real engine because it's big and heavy, and I would have been taking it in and out multiple times. So I decided to do this mock-up, and that has been fantastic. That skeleton engine, as I call it, weighs about 40 pounds, and the transmission weighs about 20 pounds. So pretty easy to handle with one person. Now what I want to do in this video is take that back out. So I'm going to have to raise the vehicle back up, take the headers off. You can see the headers are mounted on there. Take those off, and those will come off from the bottom side. Take those out, probably unbolt the mock-up transmission from the mock-up engine, so it's just easier, a little less weight, easier to handle. Get that out of the way, and then pull the engine out. The goal is to test fit the actual engine. I'm going to show you that in just a second. So I want to put that in place, verify that the transmission tunnel is doing, or cut out big enough for what I want to do. And then I'm also going to look at what I'm going to do for a cross member for the transmission. Now I've talked about this before. I had ordered a cross member from Stifler's, and it's a great setup. It is a really nice setup. But I may have to approach it differently than it's designed. And again, I talked about that in the last video. So if you haven't seen my videos on this, go back and look at that playlist. It's under Fangled. And don't forget, if you like these kind of videos, leave a comment and a thumbs up. Now let me show you the other components that I'll be working with today. So on this side of the garage is the Generation 2 Coyote engine with the 6R80 transmission, and I've adapted it to take an old school 2-barrel carburetor and, you know, chrome air cleaner, because that makes it more, no, just kidding. That's just sitting there because I have a couple of 302s sitting over here on the side that I'm going to be dealing with later, and I just thought it looked kind of funny. That's the engine. This is the computer module for it. And here is the gas pedal for it. And there's some other things that will happen with this engine moving forward, but I need to make sure it's going to fit in the vehicle. This is that cross member I talked about from Stifler's, and I went into some detail on this in the other video previously, so if you want to check that out you can. But this kit is set up for the 6R80 and for a classic Mustang, but it doesn't relate to a TCI suspension kit. Now, this is the original transmission mount that came off of that, and this is the replacement that's built in with this system. So I may end up using this, I may end up doing some modifications and making something similar to this, or I may make something completely different. I haven't decided yet. Over here I have a brand new I Did It steering column, and I'll be test fitting that as well moving forward. I want to make sure everything is going to clear. Currently, the headers that are with this came with the TCI kit. They were like a bonus, and it's snug. You know, I've got, if you look through that opening right there, you can see the U-joint coming off of the rack and pinion, and it's going to be kind of snug. The headers are a little close here and there, but that's pretty normal whenever you're trying to do something like this. But I'm going to take all this back out, and then I want to get the engine up on my air hoist and try to see if I can get it in here when I move the car up to this area. So I'm going to get that out of the way and move on. So taking the car off the lift and just rolling it forward, trying to get it closer to where the engine will be, because I can't move my hoist. And this chain, as I talk about later in the video, was on the engine whenever I received it. So I've been using it. I have a couple bolts in the links, and the reason for that was to try to find the balance point and keep it in that position. So I adjusted this several times trying to get it to be at the angle that I want. I'm still not happy with this the way that it is. It just feels kind of uncomfortable to me to be lifting up the engine this way. So there'll be more on that later. I ordered a lift plate from a company called Massive, and I will talk about that later in the video. So I'm just rolling the car forward here. Rolls nice and easy. I can steer it nice and easy with the system that's on it with that rack and pinion from TCI. And I'm trying to get the engine to sit down in position, and I realize it's not going to be that easy. And I knew this, and that's why I had used that mock-up engine and the mock-up transmission to try to alleviate some of the fitment problems. I put the jack underneath here and jack up the tail shaft of the transmission to try to improve the angle. Now I know later on this will come into play because right now I don't have the core support in, and I intentionally left that out just so I could pull this engine in and out as many times as I needed in order to make everything fit. So reviewing what I have, playing with the angles on the transmission, and I realize I can't put it in. It's just not going to work. There's more things fighting me in this situation, and so I'm going to address that here in just a second and talk about what I'm going to do to make it fit. Well, it's sort of getting there. I'm running into a few conflicts. One of those is this, I guess it's a shifter plate or a protective plate for the shift linkage. I did not anticipate that being a problem, so currently it's hitting the floor pan. I think I could just take that plate off at this point. I don't see it really making much difference, but that is one item. Secondly, I'm looking up here, and I know that I think I talked about potential for removing these modules. Now my understanding is you can take these off, the valving, you tie it open, and then there's little plates you put over these to block it off, and you can get rid of all this. But I'm also looking at this flange. Now of course this is the firewall, lower cowl, upper cowl, and this is typically how they look. You know, the original cars, they stuck out, they were sandwiched together like that. But I think it's going to make sense for me to trim this off. We're not gaining anything by having it there, and it'll clean this up and make it look nicer. I can come all the way back to the edge here, and that'll give us a little relief here, you know, because it's a sharp edge. Trying to do stuff there could be a problem. Now at this point I still have about 3 inches to go down here, and I know that that plate's hitting right now. This side I don't really see anything conflicting. It's going to take some effort to get it to drop down into these, you know, these mounts. Now I don't know what would be best, because I've done things a variety of ways in the past. I've done it to where I've actually put the mounts, depending on the car, put the mounts in this piece, the cross member, and then bolt the mount to the engine after it's in place. But I don't like that idea right now. I want to be able to put this down in there. The other thing, and I don't think it's a conflict, it's really hard to see, the oil pan. Let's see if I can get underneath here. So right now the oil pan is still clearing, I don't know, let me get my angle better here. It's still clearing this cross member. I can get my little hand in there. And it's not hitting the rack and pinion. So there's still a little gap there. Now it's not to say it's going to be a problem or not, whether it be a problem or not, but knowing that I have to go back and then drop down about 3 inches, it's going to be close. Now, I know I did a template of the oil pan with the mock-up, and it didn't have a problem, but of course that is something that you can just set down in there. This isn't this massive assembly that you have to manipulate down into the engine bay. So I think I'm going to try removing that plate and then wiggle it back a little further. You can see the oil pan down there. Let me zoom in a little. So there's the first part of the oil pan, the radius there. starting to meet with that cross member. Now that cross member is custom cut for the intention of having that go into that area. So I'm going to just keep playing with it and see if I can get it in place, and of course you'll be along for the ride. Well, I pulled the engine back out. I just set it on the floor there with some blocks of wood to keep it from falling over. Not too worried about that. And what I think I'm going to do is I look at this more, and I've had some other people share some information with me on what they did in this area. So this rain gutter, I mean, that's what it is. You've got this little flange here, and any water that would come down, it's meant to like run off to these sides. So that's really all that edge is a rain gutter. Is it relative? Is it important? That's debatable. However, that line of that rain gutter, if you follow it across, would actually cut through these two holes and these two holes over here. I think what I'm going to do is start by trimming this back, and I've drawn kind of a first run line that relates to this center section of the cowl, the upper cowl, because if I cut this off, which I could do, I don't want to cut that off, I don't need to cut it off, but if I keep this little bit of a corner here, I can radius it down. If you'll notice, this is how it's stamped, so it has this taper that runs down to the front, and that relates to the bracing that goes across here. Now, what I could do, and what I may do, is trim this back and then taper this down, and I think that'll give it a cleaner look. The alternative would be to cut this all the way back to this edge and maybe recreate that little flange, but I don't know that it's necessary. And then when you look, I'll be getting closer to the edge of these welds. Now, the other thing I'm looking at doing is maybe just filling these in, because there's no shock towers. There's nothing that's going to be attached to this. There's no room for any kind of extra bracing that's going to, was available. So we don't really gain anything by having these bolt holes here. So I may just fill those in and just address this back as much as I can. The other thing I'm looking at is these modules here. I've been told you can remove all of this and block these off, and I'm going to look into that a little more and see if I can't get some more information on that before I get too far along. Also, this is that bracket that I was talking about, and like I said, it's meant to protect, I guess, the shifter. It has one little nut holding it right there, so I'll take that off. We do have a shifter on order, and it's going to be a low car shifter, so we're going to look at that later on. But at this point, that's kind of where I'm at with this. So make some modifications and see if I can't get it to fit back in there. As I do this type of project, I want everybody to know what I'm doing and why. And so that's why I go into detail with every one of the steps that I'm trying to achieve. So in this case, as I mentioned, I'm trimming off the flange for the upper lower cowl and the firewall and trying to make as much room as possible. These are things we don't normally consider when we're putting in a standard size engine, even a 302 or 351, even like a big block 390, 428. This probably wouldn't come into play. But this engine, this Coyote style or modular engine, is quite large, and there's always room needed. And so in this case, doing this, trimming off this flange, is going to help with that process. I try to take my time when I'm doing these cuts and think about the process. As I get ready here, I set up the welder, the Yes Welder DP200, and I love this welder. It does such a great job welding things together, and I haven't had any issue with it at all. I know I've used other welders in the past. I've talked about the Arc Captain and previous welders that I've used, the Yes Welder variations that I've had in the past, and I really do like this welder. So I emphasize, if you're going to get one, look into those. So I finish up grinding down these welds, smooth everything up, and make sure there's no sharp edges after I'm finished. So I've been looking at these modules on the back of the intake manifold here, and my understanding is this is IMRC. What does that mean? I don't really know. I just know that these can be deleted based on videos that I've seen. In order to do that, you have to remove this stuff. So I'm going to try to remove everything here. And you know, you've got these like little lock buttons here. There's this little red tab is a lockout. So I'm going to try to remove everything here that's probably not necessary and continue on. This one's got some tape on it. Maybe I can still push it in. There it goes. So I'm going to unplug those, and then it has these little star point bolts. So I'm going to just start removing things and see how far I can get. Nice part is I'm not like cutting something. I'm not breaking something off. So that's like a little guide on the end here. I don't know if this is a servo motor, but that kind of just free floats in there. So it might be just a carrier for the end of this little shaft. So there's that one too. You know, it's got a switch on it. It's got a plug end on it, wiring connector. So it's got to do something, but it may be just like an indicator, letting the computer know if it's open or closed. All right, so it's got like a little, like a ball socket on the end here. I'm gonna have to push that off. Get this off. One more inside there. One more hidden down low. Okay, so there's that. One more up here. See if I can get a better angle so you can see the ball socket thing. So it's right here. And that should pop off, and it does. Now the idea of these is you want to block them, from my understanding, in the open position. Get this one off. Got to fight with the wiring in the way. There it goes. Okay, so that's the second one. Oh, that's a big storm coming. All right, so that's off. And then I've got another wiring connection here. These two. Now, I'm going to have to do some research to make sure that these can be maybe separated or removed. You know, I don't know if they need to be there anymore. And then this vacuum port can come off as well. Or vacuum hose, I should say. So let me just get that loose. There we go. Now this will have to be capped off. Just like this one will likely have to be capped off. Depending on the engine or the generation of this engine, like this shaft, I've seen other videos where they've just pulled this completely out. And they also sell these little caps to like snap onto the ball and then lock them in the open position. What I'm trying to determine, I have some block off plates, and I'm under the impression these are for the Gen 2, but I have not like seen these installed. So I'm looking at these right here. And it appears, you know, they attach like that, but I need to figure out how they're supposed to work, because just doing that doesn't help me if it doesn't stop this from moving. So I may have to come back to this. Somebody had recommended these plates for this purpose, but I don't see what they're going to do here, because I could see where they could attach, but that's it. That's all that's in the packaging, is these two nice, they're really nice plates. They're aluminum, you know, really nice made. But they don't do anything for what I'm trying to do here. So I'll have to come back to that. So at this point, this is out of the way, and I'll check to see if I can eliminate the wiring or if it just needs to stay here. I also, I'm under the impression you have to modify the computer, the ECM, so that it like doesn't recognize these, apparently. So anyway, I may have to come back. I don't think these are going to help me. So I have ordered a different set of those little plates, and they're on the way. They should be here in the middle of this coming week. So I'm going to move on and show you. We have the shifter. Now this is a low car kit, and the owner has provided me with this kit here, which is the trim ring and the boot that's going to go around the shifter. And I don't know if we have a part number here somewhere. There it is. So there is the part number for the shifter, 4-inch straight lever mushroom black knob. I'm going to open the box up and show you what's inside. But these kits are really nice, and one of the really cool things is this detent here in the center of the shifter. You can push this down and then operate the shifter itself. So I'm going to show you those details in just a second. Let me open up the box and we'll take another look. So as soon as you open the box up, first thing you're going to see is a set of instructions. Now this shifter, it gives instructions here as to connecting the brackets and stuff, the pieces and parts, and it's actually breaks it down into different transmissions. So this is the 4L60E, this is AODE and 470W, here is 6R80, which we'll be using, 6L90E, 4L80E, so this will fit a variety of different transmissions. Now one thing I did notice when I looked at these instructions a little earlier, so the 6R80, it shows this plate going underneath, and then the shifter arm, which on the transmission right now is pointing up. So this appears to make it point down, and I think that it's part of the kit is in there, but you'll see this plate attaches to the bottom of the oil pan, and there's spacers involved and stuff like that. So there'll be more on that later on. Right now, I'm just interested in seeing how all of this works together. Some piece of foam there on top here, and this is the shifter itself. Well packaged. It even comes with this little bag on top of the shifter knob. We'll talk about that in just a second. But I'm going to pull out the other parts that are in here, and under this little door on the side is a parts kit. So there's screws and bolts and brackets and stuff like that in this little parts kit. There's a part number there. And then the other thing inside underneath is the cable. Now this cable overall, let me see if I can kind of give you an idea. This is probably, I don't know, 3 feet long, 4 feet long overall, something like that. It's kind of hard to give a measurement without pulling out a tape measure. But it has this adjustable end on it that you can index this in and out, change length. On the end here, I'm sure there's a connection point. So there's a threaded end with a little boot on top of it. And same thing over here on this end, threaded end. Now this one doesn't seem to have like adjustment. There's a rubber boot here. And so I'm sure there's, you know, I'll get to that later when I incorporate the parts together, or put the pieces together. So nice cable. Now the really cool part, the shifter itself. So here up on top there is a plate, and this is the one that I talked about that goes underneath the oil pan, and based on, or I mean the transmission pan, and based on the dimensions I'm seeing, it appears that's what's gonna, that end is gonna attach there. That's diameter. So that's that one. And then there's a secondary plate here. We'll show that in just a second. Let me adjust the camera a little so you can see it, maybe just a little better. So that's all I see in this foam, except for the shifter itself. And that is a really nice piece of machined hardware right there. You can see just how nice all this is, the fit and finish. Fantastic. You've got some electrical connections here. There's some coming out the back and some out the front. So we'll have to go over that later on. And then pull off the little boot and you've got that detent button. Now the way this works is you can see it has park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then a S down here. So that is going to deal with shifting, but all the way forward, and this arm swings to the back, is your park position, and then it's hard to manipulate this with just holding it in free air, but there's a reverse, and then it'll come back into neutral, and then you've got this where you can move it to the side, and that allows you to do your cool shifting, your fun shifting. Very cool, very cool. And then this piece, I already looked at it. It goes right there, and then there's these other components will all interact later. So the only thing I think I may mess with is the arm. I'm assuming, you know how that is. I'm assuming this arm is for the shift linkage itself off of the transmission. So it's got this squared off opening, and normally that implies you're connecting to like a shaft, and that allows you to pivot and rotate the shaft. So that's my assumption with that. The other hardware in here, washers and zip ties, and there's a rod end, so that goes on the one end of the cable. Here's another kind of a clamp looking thing. This goes to the other end of the cable, and that'll probably interact with the shifter itself, but I'll get more into that later on. Right now I'm just worried about getting the transmission taken care of so that I can get it into the car without a problem. Because as I mentioned in the previous video, when I was trying to put it in, there's a plate on the side of the transmission, which I'll show you, that interfered with the engine and transmission going into the car. So I'll show you that too. And this is what I was talking about. So this is a shield, is my assumption, for protecting the shifting arm there. So there's just one nut there. I'll take that off, and then I'm pretty confident I can just take the nut off down here on this arm and swap over the other piece. So pretty easy. And I may try to test fit this again and see how far I get. So I took off that plate and I put that shifter lever on there. As I talked about, it's got a square opening, so it only really fits one way and faces downward. Otherwise it would be way up here, and that's not where we want it. Now I did start to show you some information on, I think it's the IMRC delete, and you know, I have to give a shout out to the owner. He had sent me a bunch of stuff last year, and I, you know, was in the middle of doing several things, didn't bother to open up the boxes. I knew he had ordered Holley parts and miscellaneous items, and I don't have to worry about this at all. Because over here is a Holley EFI system. So this is going to eliminate a bunch of stuff. As you can see, it's got your base piece here. This piece bolts to that piece, and then this piece bolts to the front. So I was going through the, you know, some boxes because I was like, you know what, I need to check into this. Well, here's a brand new fuel rail. There's another one in this box over here, and in other boxes that I went through, there is a whole bunch of stuff. There's fuel injectors, there's wiring harness, there's a control module, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is going to relate to this. Now, I won't pull out everything right now because I don't need to, but basically the point is it's going to eliminate all of this. And there's enough wiring and everything back there that, at least what I'm seeing, it's probably going to eliminate all of this. All this wiring and everything will be replaced. So, shout out to the owner. My fault for not checking all of that stuff when it came in, but as I said, we were, going through these the process of, let's say, designing the car in effect, and he chose wisely and did all this ahead of time, and it's on me for not looking into it. So, no harm, no foul. I canceled the order that I made for these little block off plates, and don't worry about those modules. More to come. Well, it's in, and the motor mount bolts are in place. There's no tension on the chain, so it's sitting where it needs to on the engine or the motor mounts. Back here, you can see just how much room there is. Those modules that I talked about earlier would have definitely been hitting there, so they would have had to been removed regardless. Now it helped to do that for this test run. There's still a little bit of room down here behind that bolt. Okay, you can see it very well. I did have to cut out more metal on this side because it would not come into the car as I wanted it to. So at this point, I've got clearance up here. This is where I had bent the metal back in anticipation of making room on that side. I've got clearance all on this side, which is great. And of course, the end here, the output shaft, let's say, of the transmission is slightly in front of the crossbar on the spider, as I call it, for the TCI setup. So if I put that original transmission mount on there, then I can probably fabricate something off of that. Now I've got wiring on that side, and some of this I don't know what all is going to be left behind, because with that Holley kit there's also some other wiring and different things. So my quick assumption is most everything up here is going to go away as far as wiring, because I know there was plug-ins for the fuel injectors. There's a rail, independent rails, and there's also a Vintage Air front runner kit for the front of the engine. So a lot of this may just be going away. Now the other thing is this pin connector goes into the module. So I have this sitting up here because another builder I've talked to has taken this module and put it right here. They cut an opening and stood that up on the inside, and then this pigtail works its way back and sits right there. The other thing I need to do is work on this part of the tunnel. So the transmission it gets wider on this side, and it is just touching the sheet metal here. So this is the top portion of the crossmember, the original tunnel crossmember that went over the top here. So I'm probably going to remove most of that and on that side as well. I talked about this previously. In this location, I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do just yet. I've got it outlined here. I could cut this loose, or what I may end up doing is cutting out the crossmember and rolling this out a little, because right now it's going to fight. Those welds are going to make it want to stay where it's at. So there's still a lot to do with the fitment, but I am very happy that I have the bolts in, as I said, on both sides. And I'm going to continue testing, cutting, whatever I need to do to make this all work, but you'll see it as I progress. What I'll likely end up doing at this point is taking this back out putting the car back up on the lift, now that I know specifically what I need to adjust or cut away and work on that. I feel like also, I know the engine's sitting, it feels like it's sitting where it should be. If I jack up the back any further, because I have a jack underneath it right now, if I jack this up, what that ends up doing is putting a bind on the motor mounts. And if these are the correct mounts for this setup, right now they're basically in the best position they can be in. And if I try to jack this up, it's really going to throw things off. So I feel like this is probably about where it needs to sit. And there'll be more on that later, but that's where we're at right now. Oh yeah, one more thing. Let me get under the front of the engine here and show you something. So currently, and I'm trying to do this while laying on my shoulder and getting underneath here, you can see the plumbing line for the rack and pinion. There's clearance, and also for the transmission. So I'm going to take the light and put it up behind, and when you can see the light, that means there's nothing blocking it. And if I go back here to the oil pan, same thing. So this is set up pretty good. It's not going to hit anything. I've already looked over everything else underneath here, and I can't find any issues at this point with this engine sitting down in the crossmember assembly. Well, I figured while I had the engine sitting in place, I should see if the master cylinder from Wilwood is going to fit. This came with the TCI kit. Now this needs to go down here and line up on these holes, but it's not going to happen. It's too long and it interferes with the valve cover. Now it's likely this needs to move outboard some, and I'm going to have to consider what I need to do to make that happen. I can move, cut things loose and move them. There are other holes over here on the side, and these are like for wiring. Wiring plug would come through, or this one down here is for the clutch, if it had a clutch. So I have to look at all this, but I feel like this is going to have to move over. I think the steering column is going to be fine. Unless there's a conflict with the headers, but I don't think there will be. So this area right here needs to move outboard. At least that's what I'm seeing at this point. Alright, so I was talking about the master cylinder, and I need to try to figure this out. And I've seen people do different things in this area. I've seen a hydro boost system. I've seen where they have moved the master cylinder outboard, and I'm trying to decide what I want to do. So I started looking at one of my original cars, and just so you know, this upper hole right here is for the washer hose. This one is the wiring harness, and this one is the speedometer cable. None of these are really going to matter. And the reason I say that, I don't know if it's even going to have windshield washers, so I don't know if that's a priority. And if it is, that can be relocated just about anywhere. The wiring harness, I don't think that's going to matter much. We can move that up or down various locations. And then the speedometer, well, we're using Dakota Digital, so that's not going to make any difference either. Now what I want to show you is some of the things that came in this kit. This is the master cylinder here. This came with the TCI kit, and my assumption is they don't consider that engine when they're building this kit. So if you measure this is about 8 1/4 inches. And as I demonstrated, if I put this in place and I try to go on the original hole, it's going to hit, and hit hard. There's really not much you can do at that point. Now the choice would be to move this outboard to get clearance, and I would probably just try to move it. I'm guessing about 2 inches would be the movement. So I would have to modify that plate or cut it loose, move it outboard, and then consider what has to happen with the pedal. I did look on Wilwood's site. They have another master cylinder that is 6 1/2 inches. So if I measure off of this face, and I come into this area. Make sure I'm on the face there. That's 6 5/8 to that side of the valve cover. Now my assumption is we're keeping these valve covers, but I don't know for sure, and I don't know what options are available. If there's something slightly different, if it's going to have a different shape here, I don't know. But I can say that smaller or shorter master cylinder, shorter in length, would fit, I think. I don't have it in my hands, so I can't say 100% for sure. As I'm going through these steps here, I want to show you, I have the original brake pedal assembly, and it does have a plunger in here to go into the original master cylinder. I don't know if one is provided with this kit. I did not see a plunger in this box that it came in. Also, it has these adapters for your lines and block-offs that go into the sides, because that has a port on both sides. So you have to block off one side regardless. The secondary box had all this stuff in it. So you've got your proportioning valve, you've got a bracket, and then some hardware. There's 2 hard lines that are already pre-bent, and you can see by this picture, this is what it's supposed to look like. So I'm going to temporarily put the master cylinder together with this kit and just kind of look at it up there to see how it's going to look, maybe if I can move stuff around. I don't know yet. So here I have the assembly. Now there's a couple spacers that are also in the kit that would go behind the plate here, and this, I'll point out, this will fit on either side. It has indication here that says front and rear, I guess, or front inlet and rear inlet. You can see FI, RI. It also has that on the other side. And basically this proportioning valve would also work on this side. However, the bracket is made for it to be on the driver's side. So what I want to do is set this down in place right here so you can see that, again, if it was over here against the engine, it would be fine. It would be plenty of room, but I need to move it outboard so it clears. And it would still clear. It would still work. But I need to look at this a little harder. See, it's got the ports on the bottom right there for the the hard lines are going to go out of this. And so there on the underneath the valve it says RO, so that would be rear outlet. FO would be front outlet, left and right. So I think, that would probably work. So I'm going to have to look at it, see if that's the answer I want to use, and if it is, then that means I need to do some modifications here. And it may mean, because this plate is thicker, there's extra material there, and to move this I'd have to probably cut way over here, eliminate these holes, and move it over, and then make a filler piece, and then make a filler piece on this side. So I think right now that's probably the option, unless we get another master cylinder to see if it'll fit as is. So this is the challenge, whenever you're piecing things together, you want to make sure that everything is going to work. You want to make sure that each and every piece will work before you commit to the final assembly. So I'll figure something out, and you'll see too. So another thing that I'll have to consider as I'm going through these steps of what's going to work and what won't work is the pedal. Now, my understanding is this pedal is basically assigned to the ECU or ECM, whatever, and you can't swap these out. But that's just what I understand. There's a code on here; it's relatable to that information. So, if we're going to use this pedal, which I'm assuming we are, it has to go somewhere, and it also has to be able to move. So the the action on this is only, I don't know, 1.5 inches, 2 inches maybe, something like that. And if I put it right here on the firewall, that's not going to work. Basically, it's bottomed out almost instantly on the firewall. So this becomes more interesting as I go through this. If I need to, or what I may have to do, is angle this to create space underneath the arm. I don't know if somebody else makes a variation of this, or if there is, maybe you can swap out the actual pedal, you know, because the servo is what activates it. So I don't know yet. I'm going to do some more research on that and try to see what I can learn. But somehow, some way, this has to have enough room here for this to compress. So I don't know. If I put it all the way up on the firewall, what I may have to do is remove part of the bottom section here, because the firewall comes across and then kicks up, you know, based on the original design. So either this has to change motion or change angle, which makes the pedal really weird, because you can see how extreme that pedal angle is. So if you do that, the pedal is kind of flat. The closer you bring it down, the closer it is to the real motion of your foot resting on it here. Now we don't use the whole pedal. None of us do. We use this lower section basically. So quick thought is, I cut this open and remake this piece so this has room, and then this will get mounted basically in the same spot. So that's a quick thought. Now the other thing I've been looking at is the pedal assemblies. So I found a few variations. One is a pedal that's made by Willwood with dual master cylinders, and I'll post a picture of it, but it's sold on the FabQuest website. And the thing is, whenever you're dealing with this assembly, is you're also dealing with the original setup for these cars. So the pedal assembly interacts with the steering column and the dash. Let me see if I can grab that. So this is the original assembly, or brake pedal assembly for the car. And this would mount, if I can get this to cooperate, this would mount basically up here. And I'm going to put some bolts in it to show you where it should sit. So now you can see what I'm referring to here. Here's the action of the pedal. Usually it's going to be somewhere in that location, and then put this to the side. And I think that idea will work with relieving the area underneath the pedal. I think that'll work fine. Now, normally you'd have the whole dash up here, which I don't have it in place, and then you'd have these bolts, and then the steering column goes through this opening right here and gets bolted up to the bottom of this. So that is something else that I need to look at as to what's going to work or not work. Another company I've been told about on this assembly was Mallwood. Somebody had mentioned that as well. And apparently they make an adapter with a slave cylinder that will give you a remote location for your reservoir for the master cylinder. I've tried to contact them. I have not received a call back yet or any information on that. When I've looked online, what I found was they have kits readily available for clutch assemblies. Like if you were going to add or have, if you had a car with a clutch in it, it would be an easy add-on using this original bracket. And I'm just waiting to hear from them. I don't see any pictures or part numbers on their website that says we sell this pedal setup with a remote or reservoir for the brake. I just don't see it. So that's kind of where I'm at right at the moment in this process. I do have some other parts on order. I'm trying to address some other things because, as you know, this whole thing, engine, transmission, it's heavy. It is a heavy system. And currently what I have is the chain that came on the engine when it was brought to me. So that's what's holding, or I'm using as a lifting device. And I've decided I really don't like that. A couple reasons. One, I don't trust those. There's some small bolts holding it together. And having this mass on that chain is making it kind of awkward to manipulate. I normally use a leveling system when I do engines. And so what I've ordered a new plate. I think it's made by Massive is the name of the company. I'll post links on that as well. And what I intend to do is take the plenum off, the intake plenum, and then that massive plate will bolt to that, and it has like 5 holes that you can lift from, and that'll help with keeping everything stable and feeling much more secure. So that is the next thing I'll probably deal with, is that. But for now, I'm still researching these pedals and see what I come up with. Okay, class. You know, I've done vintage area installs before, and I think I've done generation 4. And if I'm reading this correctly, this is Gen 5. So generation 5 with factory air, without factory air evaporator kit. So this is the part number in this instance. So you can see that right there. Now, I've only pulled out so much of this kit. You know, I pulled out the main box that goes under the dash because I want to see if that's going to fit. And I also need to see how the plumbing lines are going to fit, right? Because that engine takes up a lot of space. Now, what I've noticed in this kit is they've changed some things. In other kits, I've seen a block-off plate, and this one is different. So this one actually has kind of a boss on it, piece of metal there sticking out, and this will go, from what I'm seeing, on the outside of the firewall. You couldn't put this, you could put it on the inside, I guess, but I don't think that's the intent. Pictures that I've seen show this on the outside, and you can see it has these specific holes. The older systems didn't have this configuration. They had like a hole and some foam or something that went around it. So a little bit, maybe an improvement, I don't know. And if you'll notice as well, there's this plate. So I think it's pretty obvious that this plate and this plate interact together. So this attaches to the air box. And then there is also a rubber gasket. This shares this pattern, at least it appears to be, you know, that's the same. But these holes are much smaller. I'm not sure if the intent is that you would just, you know, push the plumbing through these. I haven't gotten that far yet. That seems rather tight for that purpose. So I don't know why they've made those holes so small. I don't know. The standard, you know, AC lines, everything has the foam on them. And then, of course, you're going to have these are going to be the lines, I assume they're the lines for the heater box. So you've got the fittings that go to the box, and then the kind of standard size, I think standard size, hoses that'll go on to these ends for your heater core that's internal to the box. Now, what I want to do is basically assemble just enough. This is another plate that goes on top of the box. This will help support it under the dash. But I want to assemble just enough to make this fit into the car. I'm not worried about the exterior plate right now. So I'm going to go through some of this. I know there's You get these kits, you know, here's this part number, packing list, and all that stuff. And there's usually, like this here, a hardware kit. And so what I'm going to do is just assemble this as much as I can, or as much as I feel like I need to. I'm not going to use all this other stuff. Here's some, you know, screw clamps, like radiator clamps. There's a module in here. This is the module that controls your heat from your engine, you know, to the heater core. So I know that's what that is. And of course there's a drain hose. I'm going to assume there's always been a drain hose in there. So I'm going to probably put this on time lapse and then film just putting the brackets and stuff on. Now, as I've said, I've put together previous versions of this vintage air system, and while they are pretty similar, there's still little things that may have changed over the years. So I can't point those out specifically as to what, you know, the previous ones, you know, may have had for configuration. These plates, I do like that they have a specific opening for them for each one of the lines that come through. And it looks like these plates actually connect together. Like there's threaded nuts welded to the backside of the plate that attaches to the airbox. And I think that intent is you can lock these two pieces together. Now, these things, they always come with a vacuum pulled on them. So you can't just unscrew these caps. You have to use a crescent wrench or something to break them loose. They want to keep these things pure when they're being shipped or stored. And so while I did not really want to take these apart and put these lines on just yet, I knew I needed to because everything needs to fit. I've also, as I expressed later in the video, consider ideas for these lines and what can be done to make room in the engine bay. I did contact Vintage Air, and as I don't discuss it later in the video, so I'm going to just kind of bring it up now. And they do offer a variety of things. They offer a bulkhead system that you can move the lines where you need them. And they also sell the lines themselves in a straight configuration to where you can hand bend them. Well, I say hand bend, you need a tool, but you can use a bender to shape the lines where you need them to go. So right now I think we're okay with this setup, but it is something that I may consider later, having the bulkhead system that I've seen on other Mustangs in particular, where they put the lines inside the wheel well on the front, and everything is kind of hidden from view in that case. So more to come on that later. All right, I have set the airbox in place. Nothing's permanent. It's just in place and set up with that 4x4 holding it just to see what the clearance is. And it looks like everything's going to be fine. Here I have the lines coming through roughly where they're going to be in, you know, the normal configuration. Nothing is permanent, nothing is anchored, but they are coming through. So you have the two heater hose outlets, and then you have your AC lines. And then this hole right here is for wiring to come through. The first thing I see right now is this sensor, whatever that sensor may be, I don't know. And that hopefully can be removed. Now, the system we're putting in, that Holley system, is going to eliminate everything. So the wiring's coming out. I was under the assumption we were going to use the computer that came with this, but the owner has talked to me and said, no, the Holley system should address that. So my understanding is all this wiring is going to go away, along with the plenum and the fuel rails, as I mentioned earlier, and hopefully, maybe, that switch or sensor can be removed. That's a pretty tight space right there. I've only got maybe an inch or inch and an eighth at this point. Now I know these lines can flex some, but they're limited how far they can flex in based on the box inside. Now I did open up one of the, I think there's 3 boxes total, and this is the box that had the condenser in it, which is now over there. And it also has these hard lines. I say hard lines, they're hard lines, but they're very soft. It's aluminum. And then brackets here that will attach to the condenser to hold it in place. Also, underneath this box that's inside of it was this hose assembly, and then some other fittings and hardware. There's some a switch over there, so a pressure switch. And what I'm seeing, if I'm seeing it correctly, is you've got these two AC lines, and this has a high side and a low side on different ends of these lines. So these two elbows would go right to the box. But you see this one has this, I don't know which one's high and which one's low, but it has that fitting right there. Also in the kit, it has these independent fittings. So if you wanted to make your own line and have them go a specific way in the engine bay, you can do that. So it's nice of them to provide both sets in this case, but you would probably have to come up with your own hose unless you wanted to cut what was in the kit. I don't see a loose hose, so that may be something to consider. These, you can see, that's the large end, that's the small end, and then this one has the fitting here, and the smaller one has the fitting here. That isn't how it is on the hoses. So that may come into play regardless, because right now that, I don't think it's going to fit in there. Not with that fitting. So I'm going to try to set these in place. I'll probably remove that sensor or whatever that sensor is right there and see what happens. And then I may try to use the hoses to see how they do. So let's find out. Well, that's not going to work. I started pulling this out and I see it's got oil on it. So that means it does something. Probably something important. That's going to have to stay. See what I can come up with. As I suspected, that's not going to work. It's already hitting the valve cover, and I can't even line up the threads at all. I have seen other configurations. I have seen where people have bypassed that opening and actually put a bulkhead out here inside the wheel well opening, let's say, and use this space. And I feel like that's probably what we're going to do, because there's not much of an alternative. Now, I'll have to find out what's available. Like if Vintage Air sells a bulkhead kit that brings it outboard, hopefully they do, and then we'll have to go with that. So that's not going to work. I always say test fit, test fit, test fit. And as I was going through the hardware, and I realized I have these fittings, right? It has the connection here for the AC coolant, and you have these that don't have fittings on them. I looked a little harder at the drawing, and you can see here it shows this one with the fitting and this one without the fitting. And then I looked a little further, and in this second drawing it shows you the lines going into the compressor and then out to the condenser. So these, you can see the shape of them there. This has a really tight elbow on it, and this one's kind of straight. And a lot of that can change as you mount stuff. You may have to do it a different way, I don't know. But currently, this one with the fitting will clear the edge of the engine, and this one with the tight turn on it clears. Now this one, you follow it around, it comes up to a straight end. And then the other one has an open end on it. So there's nothing there. So the idea is that you make the fitting you need, I guess, work, because this is kind of like a, I guess, bonus at this point, and I'm assuming this one is going to go on the other end. That'll all come into play later, of course. Now, what I plan to do, I think, I don't really like the way the lines are coming out of the heater hose here. This is kind of straight into the corner of the valve cover. What I may end up doing, and again, there's always room for improvement, I may end up moving the whole assembly outboard slightly. And the reason is there's room. Like if you come under here, I say there's room right now, but if you come under here and look, there's space beside the air box, and it'll actually help a little bit over the tunnel. So I want to make sure I have every little thing fitted so I don't have to backtrack. I think we're good. I think we're good. I was concerned at first using the regular little fittings here, independent, but now I think I can make it work. Do that. Okay, it looks like I've had a parts explosion in here, but the reality is I want to keep you updated on how this is going, and I want to share as much as I can in this situation. So I just got off the phone with Willwood, and as we all know, this kit that I'm putting in this car was a TCI kit using Willwood components. And if you remember in a previous video, I assembled the spindle into the control arms, and when I pulled that spindle out of the box, the caliper was already attached. So I had no idea what the dimensions were for that caliper, meaning the piston bore on, for the front. I have no idea. However, I did have the part number for the back, and I started the conversation with Willwood talking about this caliper setup on the back because I had the boxes right here. So the rear caliper is 120-13839, and what I've learned from Willwood, and you can measure this, but it has a 1 3/8 inch bore for the pistons, and there are 4 pistons. So this is the front caliper, and you can see how big these pistons are, and we couldn't figure out what these were until I took it off of the car, because there's nothing that I found in the paperwork from TCI that tells you what this caliper is. So internally there are a set of numbers right here, and I think that's 13857, and then this half is 13858. So that's the part number for each half of the caliper. There's nothing else on this that tells you what the number is. Nothing I could find. So with those numbers, the guy I talked to on the phone let me know that these bores are 1 3/4 inches. So that helps. We're trying to address the master cylinder situation. The kit that came from TCI is a 1-inch bore master cylinder. So in fact it even says it right there, 1 inch. Now from what the guy at Willwood was telling me, this is designed for a power brake setup. The bore is too big, and this is meant to go with a power brake booster. So what he recommended was another master cylinder that is a 15/16 inch bore, since we're going with manual brakes, and it also works with the bracket system that is already existing in the car for the 68 Mustang. And I wrote that down as well. So here is the 15/16 bore is what he had recommended, and the part number he recommended is 261-15523-BK, denoting that it's black. So I'm learning as I go through this as well. When you order something from a vendor, I don't know what the variables are. Like, I don't know what TCI may have said, hey, this is what we offer, or if they have a different way of doing things. I don't really know, but I want to share this information so that you can make some decisions as well, because all of this stuff, as I mentioned, interacts, and it's important that we know what is going to work with what. And I've said it before, test fit, test fit, test fit, and we'll now narrow down these choices, and then everything hopefully at the end is going to work fine. So right now I'm not going to do much else on the car. I've got the customer, the owner of the car has ordered that master cylinder. It should be on its way. And something I want to address here, this engine, I don't like this. I may have mentioned this earlier. I don't like using a chain and the bolts and just pulling stuff together. So what I plan to do, I've ordered a plate from a company called Massive. I guess that's the name of the company, but it's a massive plate, and it's designed to take the place of this plenum, this intake plenum. Let me show you that. So this is the plate that I've ordered, and as I said, it's massive. It says so right there. That's the name of the company. It even has their stickers holding the box together. This is heavy duty. 1/4 inch thick plate, comes with this 5 ring locations or 5 hole locations for you to attach to. In this package here is hardware to go in all of these holes so you can bolt it down securely. This was in the box and links all their websites, I guess. And then it also talks about this plate system. So the other thing is it had a pack of peanuts in there. Can't go wrong with that, I guess. And I will post links to this on the video and also down below in the description box if you're interested in something like this. And I think that's as far as I'm going to get right now. So, lots of things to think about, lots of pieces and parts that have to merge together to make this work. I'll just give you, I may have mentioned this earlier, I don't know. That engine is 29 inches, roughly 29 inches wide at its widest point. This engine, factory engine, 18 inches. 18 inches. Big difference. So you have to figure out ways to make this stuff work. Now, I'm trying to give as much information as I possibly can because there are a vast amount of choices that can be made in building something like this. And so I'm going down the path and I'm finding those answers and trying to give you as much insight as I can. The brake system, there are variables to that as well. Like I said earlier, I think I posted some pictures and stuff. So there's many options out there that probably work, but you have to go your own way in this process. You know what I mean? So, thank y'all. I hope that you're enjoying these videos and I hope that you're learning stuff as we go. I ask you, if you would, to become a patron. I post videos on Patreon. I do a weekly update on Patreon. I interact more there, I think, than anywhere else. If somebody's got a question or needs some, some advice, I'll work with my patrons really quickly and try to help them out. But, YouTube is terrible for me because I'm not an entertainer. I'm here to give you instruction and advice and try to help you with your projects. YouTube, they don't care about me at all. I'll be honest. And my revenue just continues to go down. I've said it before, if it wasn't for my patrons, I probably wouldn't put videos on YouTube at all. So, if you follow the links down below, you'll see there are links for Patreon, Amazon. There's probably a link for t-shirt stuff down below somewhere. I'm not too worried about any of that. But if you're interested, follow those links and become a member. And we'll see what happens. Otherwise, I want to thank my patrons specifically for being here and helping me out, keep making these videos. And I want to thank you as well. If you would, leave a thumbs up and a comment to help with the algorithm if it helps at all. I don't know. But that'll be it for this video. So until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.